designer of Pop It Ups dies for Elizabeth Craft Designs, and today I'll be teaching a tutorial on this. A Halloween Open Center Accordion card. This is for the August 2015 Designer Challenge called Inspired Creations. My first inspiration piece is this 4-page oval accordion by Kelly Booth, and I liked how she used the fishing line to suspend the Easter eggs. Now I wanted to make a Halloween themed oval accordion, so I looked to 2 more of the Designer Challenge team's cards for inspiration. On Kaz Council's card, I really liked how she styled Poppy the Owl as a little Franken Poppy, and so I wanted to repeat that. And I also loved what she did with the Damask embossing folder to get that silver and black look to it. And from Fran Sabad's card, I really liked how she used the oval clouds frame edges to get kind of a spooky background. It's a little unexpected. By using gray pages and black edgers, she really got a great background, and I wanted to use that for sure. And of course, I wanted to teach a bunch of cool techniques along the way. So the primary technique you're going to be learning in this video is how to do an open center accordion. And I'm going to use the oval accordion, but this can be done with any of the accordion dies. So when I say open center, that's exactly what I mean. There is no outer oval frame that's coming down in between the 2 center ovals. So there's nothing that's going to impede your view. You can see right down into that valley, and you can see all the decoration on both pages with nothing in the way. This is a technique that's going to work best in multiples of 4 pages. So you want to do a 4-page album or an 8-page or a 12-page, but just make sure it's multiples of 4. So technique number 1 is how I'm going to imitate Kaz's silver and black damask pattern. Now Kaz rubbed a silver gelato over an embossed surface after she embossed. I'm going to do it a little differently because I'd like to have the silver on both sides of the piece. So I'm just going to use a silver ink pad, and I'm going to rub it lightly just so it doesn't get down into the hole. So you wouldn't want to smush, you definitely want to smear. You're going to rub that silver ink pad all over both halves of the embossing folder. I'm a fan of Bazzill's cardstock for the accordions because it's nice and thick. It's a 100-pound cardstock. I'm going to use the black, I think it's called Licorice, on this one. And I've cut that panel as 6 inches long and 5.5 inches wide. And as you see, I'm arranging the folder all the way to one side of that piece. So not centered, but all the way to the side. And then just use an embossing sandwich in whatever machine that you have. Any of your major die cutting machines can use an embossing folder. And that's just a really quick and easy way to transfer that silver ink to the raised portions on one side and then to the background on the other side. And both sides are beautiful. I'll repeat that process because I want to use this pattern for my outer 2 pages on the album. And what I'm going to use to die cut them is the oval accordion die. So now you can see why I slid the embossing folder over to one side. It just makes it easier for me to position the die in the same way so that it's just the long side tab where my tape pieces are. That's the only piece that's over the black section that did not get embossed. That just keeps me from having to go back through with the embossing folder and emboss and ink again because it's just the side tab. That's going to be hidden anyway when the album is assembled. Now that's decorated on both sides, and I just need to repeat that process with my other piece of black cardstock. Now let's move on to technique number 2, which is the open center accordion. What I'm going to start with is an 8-inch by 6-inch piece of cardstock, and I'm going to fold that right up the middle. So that'll end up being a 4-inch by 6-inch card when it's folded. Now you can do this technique with any of the accordions. On the blade side of the die, you just want the fold of the card to come up near, not quite to, but near the tab or tabs of the die. And then of course you do want it straight. I'm using the die itself up at the top there just to make sure that my cardstock is straight. And then you're just going to tape that down and roll it right through the machine. I'm using more like an 80-pound cardstock for this rather than the 100 since I'm trying to cut through 2 layers. And I did roll it back through just to make sure that it would cut right through both layers. But it did a beautiful job. And then when I take that off and remove it from the die, what it's going to do is it has mirror imaged itself on that fold line. Folding it is going to be ever so easy. I'm just going to go in there on the center line and reverse just the outer frame so that they become a mountain fold. That should just pivot the ovals where they need to pivot. And you'll see now that now you've got the open center portion of the open center accordion. So this is how it will fold when I'm ready to assemble, but for now I'm going to flatten it back out again so that I can continue with my decorating. I've die cut 4 short and 2 long oval clouds frame edges out of black cardstock that has the Elizabeth Craft Designs double-sided adhesive on the back. I'm going to start with a short edge because there's a tiny cloud right in the middle that I can use to line up right across the pivot point of my oval to help me with placement. And I should see a little shadow of the original gray color on the inside edge. Now this is going to be too long because of course we've done this alternate technique, so I'll have to trim off the excess. Frame edges become really simple when you use the double-sided adhesive and you just go one by one. You line up the next one to the one before it. You'll need 2 long ones for the long edges and then 4 shorts for the short edges. They are going to touch in the corner to the previous frame edge. That will complete a couple clouds, which is kind of a fun look, and then they're just going to go all the way around and give that really cool finished look. And because we have shortened our album, of course you'll have to trim off the excess around the fold area. So here's my cool Fran-inspired clouds background. Time for technique number 3. Let's do the fishing line floating. Okay, triple duty here because I'm going to nest in the largest oval solid decorator die, but also the stitching die at the same time and cut it. The pressure of the machine is also going to set my frame edges for me, so that's going to be wonderful. And when the piece comes out, which is the gray oval, it will have cut the window out of the page, but also the resulting piece has got that decorative stitch line on it since I put both dies in, and I can use that on one of my other pages. I get the oval accordion die out again, plus those same 2 decorator dies, nest them together, and cut the black cardstock that has the Elizabeth Craft Designs double-sided adhesive on the back. What I'm looking to do is to isolate just the oval frame. So I just need to take scissors and cut off any connection points and tabs that are on the oval from the oval accordion die. And what I'm left with is a thin black oval frame that will fit on my page. Thanks to the double-sided adhesive, I can just peel up the liner on that frame, and then before I would stick it to the album, I would want to add the fishing line. So I'm just going to stick that across the opening the long way, and then just press it down really well into the exposed adhesive. Now I want to trim off my excess fishing line from the black oval before I put it onto the page. That way I don't have to try and get my scissors in there and do that afterwards. I could accidentally cut my pivot points on the accordion. I would hate to do that. So just trim it off first. And then it should just line up pretty well right on the page, and get your fishing line is now suspended on the page. Whatever you glue back to back around that fishing line will just float in the opening. Now you crafters may already own a cute little bat die or maybe a punch or even a pre-made embellishment. I somehow had no such thing, so I decided I was going to craft my own bats. I made them using Coco the horse's mane, of all things, and I will show you how to do that. It's an upcoming technique. But for now, sticking with my fishing line technique, I'm just going to show you how I adhered them. I actually took advantage of the leftover tiny clouds that came out of that self-adhesive clouds edger. I put that behind the fishing line because it was small and self-adhesive, and then I just stuck my little self-made bats to it. So basically, now the bat is sandwiched around the fishing line. On one side is the full bat. On the back side is those tiny little clouds. Then when the card is closed, just for a spot of realism, I think I will go ahead and add some little eyeballs just in case someone's looking at the album from the back of the album, then the little bats will still appear to have their little spooky eyes. Tiny red glitter dots will work perfectly as eyes. Okay, as promised, here's technique number 4, how to make bats and bones using the Coco the horse die. Coco comes with this die that cuts both the parts of his mane, and this is what I'm doing. I'm taking a Sharpie pen and I'm making the black lines that you see in the close-up there on the right. So that's going to be the location that I will need to add the fold of the cardstock to make both the wings of the bat and the head of the bat. You will have to do this in 2 different passes. You'll have to use one little folded piece of cardstock on the big part to make the wing first, and then you'll have to roll back through with another little folded piece of black cardstock on the other line to make the head. Taping it down can help you, and you see I've just got the fold line of the cardstock right on my black pen line. And while I'm in the business of cutting, I'm just going to cut the legs of the horse at the same time. When that piece comes out, I can unfold it, and there is my little bat. He just needs a head, and that's how you use the other little fold line. So another folded piece of black cardstock, tape down over the other fold line, cut some additional horse legs while I'm in the business of cutting. Then when I'm going to unfold that little small piece, it will transform itself into a really cool little bat head. I'm just always on the lookout for other ways that you can use the dies to create the pieces that you want. So, you know, obviously if you have a bat die, we'll just use that. But if you don't, you can make your own. Okay, so I'm going to use the little bat head over the top of the little bat wings. And then what's going to make perfect little eyeballs, of course I already showed you before, is the smallest little glitter dots from a red glitter dot sheet. And there's my finished bat. Coco the horse's legs make great bones. All you need is a pair of detail scissors. I'm using the Elizabeth Craft Designs detail scissors. And at every joint, just go in and cut the ends into a little bone shape. So that just means you kind of round it, you go down to a point, come back up again and round it some more. And just do that at every single joint and you'll end up with a whole bunch of cool bones. I made another silver embossed damask pattern on a piece of black cardstock and die cut one of the large oval decorator dies out of it just to tie in that same pattern into my inner pages. And that's going to be the backdrop for my completed little monster mouse. I did film the assembly steps for turning Jolly the Mouse into the little monster mouse. It is posted as a separate video, so you will see that on the blog post and my YouTube channel. The process that we used to make the center two pages, the open center pages, resulted in no tabs on those pages at all. So you're going to rely on the tabs that are on your two full pages out on the ends of the album to connect them. And this is why I mentioned that you really want to make albums like this in multiples of 4. And that way out on either side of your little open center, you've got two full pages. And that will also help it look right when the card is closed. So when the card's closed, your center pages aren't going to have a full frame around them, but you won't see them because you've got this full frame page on the front of the album and you've got a full frame page on the back of the album. So I'm just using the long tab that are on those full pages with my strong Elizabeth Craft Designs double-sided adhesive to attach the center portions to them. So from here it's assembly just like a regular accordion. I like to bend that page up so that I don't cross the fold and I can make sure that I get it in there nice and straight and then press those two pages together so that they can still hinge and bend on that fold line. And a brayer can be really helpful for that. So now I have all 4 of my pages connected together. The rest of the assembly is actually going to be just like a typical accordion, but before I do that, I want to finish out all of my decorations. It's going to be much easier to do that while the album is flat. One thing I thought would look really cool would be to add all of those little white bones around the black ring page. One final technique to teach before we assemble this album, and that is technique number 5, the transfer paper background. I have a roll of white transfer paper. Now this is pretty common in other crafts, you know, where people want to transfer a pattern, say if they're doing like some toll painting or stained glass or something like that, they use this transfer paper to transfer patterns. But what we're going to do is use the pressure of the machine to transfer that white into whatever pattern our die is. So the first thing I need to do is make sure that the die isn't going to cut through my transfer paper. I just want it to press it into the cardstock. So I'm going to put an embossing sandwich in my machine. A piece of scratch paper is going to protect that surface so that I don't transfer the excess white that's around the oval onto my silicone rubber. So I have my black oval and then I've got my white side down onto the black oval and then I'm going to press into that. I want to press that all seasons tree. The embossing sandwich underneath it is what's going to keep that tree from just cutting right through the transfer paper and through the oval. It's just basically going to press itself down into that oval. And of course it transferred white sort of everywhere. Now one way you could highlight that tree would be to take just a regular pencil eraser and erase outside of the tree. That's going to take a while. I don't really want to do that. So instead I'm just going to use a baby wipe, just an unscented baby wipe, fresh one out of the thing so it's pretty good and moist. And I'm just going to rub over the top. It'll take all of that extra white away, but anything that's been pressed down by the edges of the die, like down into the grooves of the tree, will stay nice and white. I just love how ghostly and spooky that ends up looking. And then for my card today, I think that I would actually like to highlight it with a solid cut black tree. But when I go to put that over the top of the one that's been debossed into the oval, I'm going to offset it just a little bit so that I can still see all those kind of crisp, ghostly tree branch white lines back behind the black tree. For my page 4 oval, I did it as a vertical tree and I did not put a black tree over the top. That way it is just the ghostly white line. So once again, I just used the baby wipe to take all of the transfer paper off except for what was down in those lines. I've had this rubber stamp for forever. Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. It's a Rubber Baby Buggy Bumpers design, but luckily Stamp Francisco bought their entire catalog, so you can still get that stamp, and I will put a link in the supply list. I sandwiched a piece of stiff wire in between two pieces of printed twill and just added some adhesive behind it. I can shape that now into any kind of banner shape I want, and then I'm going to put that along with my little die-cut stamped greeting right there on page 4. Final assembly of the album is pretty straightforward. It is only a matter of connecting the little small tabs from the outer pages into the inner ovals. So however is easiest for you to do that. I'm always a fan when I'm doing an album that just has a single tab, so that means the circles and the ovals, of trying to get the ovals on top of each other to press those together, because then I know that I have them straight. You know, I can't have them crooked that way if I can line up the ovals. It can be a little tricky, but if you can find a position to get in there with your fingers to be able to hold that in place, that's just a great way to add them. Or flat on the table like this and bringing it over, that works as well. Once the glue sets up, the album is complete. You can open it up and see how nice it is without having that center frame. You don't have anything to impede your view. Even though those are shorter, the gray pages are shorter, when you fold it up you can't tell because you have those big outer frames on the outside of the album. Now, one thing I noticed is that my embossed pattern stopped a little short of the edge. I'm going to solve that by just adding a piece of orange ribbon, which I kind of wanted to tie in the orange color anyway. I'll just wrap that through and tie it in a knot on the front and trim the edges. And that will cover up that little bit of black on the front of the album that didn't get the embossed pattern. Now, when you're displaying an open center accordion, the little open center 2 pages, they have shorter pages. So what that means is the ovals are going to stay a little bit bent. So if you're familiar with accordion albums, you know that usually you could pull the ovals and they would go all the way straight into a straight line. Not on this album. See, if I try and straighten those, I don't have enough room because the outer pages are a little bit shorter. So those 2 pages are going to remain a little bit bent all the time, although you can still see down in there. It's great viewing angle, so you really don't have to worry about it. Just know that you will always have just a little bit of an inverted V on your 2 inner ovals. The About section on YouTube, or the blog post, I think there's probably something floating on this screen that'll take you right there, are your best bets to seeing photos and supply links for everything that was used on this project, plus a link to see all of the other inspired creations for this month's challenge. eCraftDesigns.com is where you can find out where you can purchase Pop It Up's dies. You can like my Facebook page, Karen Burniston Designer. I post daily inspiration, and you can always find more ideas on my blog, KarenBurniston.com. Thanks for watching.